We hope we will be able to return to our usual commemoration activities in due course. It is impossible to embrace the scope of Holocaust Memorial Day and its theme in only a few words. But with the help of our contributors throughout this short civic commemoration film, I hope that their words will help us towards greater awareness and deeper understanding of both our past and the present.
I'm pleased that I've been able to honour our commitment of marking Holocaust Memorial Day as an annual civic event during these unprecedented times. This year's theme, Be the Light in the Darkness, is now more relevant than ever. Holocaust Memorial Day runs to the heart of our organisation's values. It's very important to me that as a city we're comfortable with diversity, and we need to respond positively, not only to remembering the events of the past once a year on Holocaust Memorial Day, but also to promote integration and community cohesion every day so that we're a truly welcoming city. Now, as a council, we pride ourselves on our strong community leadership and working together with all our communities to ensure that the city is welcoming to all our residents and visitors, whatever their background. And we take our responsibility seriously, including our statutory responsibility to eliminate hate crime. We work with our partners to serve the best interests of our city and its communities, as we did when we set up safer reporting centres across the city to ensure that the victims of hate have somewhere they feel safe to report their experiences. Lastly, we treat everyone with dignity and respect, including our residents, colleagues and service users. This year especially, we have had a diversity drive, and we're working hard to ensure that equality and diversity is at the centre of everything we do. By ensuring that Plymouth remains a fairer city where everyone does their bit, we encourage people from all backgrounds to make this city their home. And so long as we continue to protect the most vulnerable people in our society and ensure that all our communities feel safe and welcome, we'll continue to grow as a city. I know how important it is to those who have suffered at the hands of historical injustice to have the opportunity to speak out and to remember the victims. And it's important that we learn all the lessons of the past and be the light in the darkness.
This year's theme is Be the Light in the Darkness. Can be interpreted in a number of ways, but to me it seems that the light implied is the light of truth in these days of fake news and other widely distributed falsehoods. One truth which comes from the very beginning of our Jewish Bible in chapter 1 is that God created mankind in God's image, male and female. Note, all mankind, we are all the same to God, and God's image is both male and female. We should also be able to see that outward differences are just superficial. We are all just people and should be friends.
This year's theme for Holocaust Memorial Day is being the light in the darkness. The idea of light is very fitting for the lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans plus community, as since the late 1970s, we've traditionally used the rainbow flag as a symbol to connect all the varied and different individuals that come under the LGBT plus umbrella, and to spotlight us as one group, so that we can challenge the prejudice that's existed throughout history and sadly still continues to endure. Prior to this, the symbols that were used to define members of the LGBT plus community were things like the pink triangle, which was used in the concentration camps of World War II. It became a label of shame made visible on gay men and women. Survivors have testified that individuals wearing pink triangles were often treated particularly severely by guards and inmates alike because of widespread hatred against homosexuals. With the LGBT plus community today being an even more diverse collection of people and identities within our own diversity, the rainbow is even more important than ever. And we stand together to symbolise who we are and what unites us as a community. And we have more in common than we do differences.
Hundreds of thousands of lives were destroyed because of Nazi persecution, and many groups affected did not receive acknowledgement of their suffering until long after 1945. On assuming power in 1933, one of the early groups the Nazis targeted for arrest and imprisonment were workplace trade union reps and activists. Dachau, the first Nazi concentration camp, was built in March 1933 to imprison political opponents and trade unionists. Trade unions were forcibly disbanded by the Nazis in May 1933, and leaders of these unions were arrested or fled into exile. The true horror of the Holocaust is unimaginable to us all in the 21st century. We can read, but we can't feel, see, or smell the intolerance of those camps and the views that drove them. But from the concentration camps and ghettos, a phoenix arose, which every single one of us has felt the warmth of. The horror of the Holocaust is the motivation that drove Europeans to build a future not based on empires or domination, but on cooperation, tolerance, and even love with our neighbours. The perpetrators of the Holocaust believed that they could wipe out their political opponents, trade unions, and the Jewish people, and many other sections of society they targeted in the gas chambers and camps. What they achieved at devastating cost and to the opposite of all of their intent was burning the bridge of public opinion with old intolerances and formed the foundation of a world built on emancipation for all. These values are not prerequisite, they are a choice and one that we need to argue and fight for and renew every day. These are the values that are at the heart of the modern trade union movement and our members protecting people in the workplace. And we choose to fight for those values every day and not to take our values for granted. We dare to dream and we dare to hope.
Disabled people were the first groups that the Nazis killed at the beginning of the Holocaust. They thought that disabled people were inferior, but not just that. They weren't really whole people, not the sort of people they wanted cluttering up the perfect new society that they were planning. But it wasn't just the Nazis. In America, Sweden, and Britain, educated people, doctors and politicians, were also discussing the problem of disability, the burden of disability, and lives that were not worth living as they were seen. And they too were looking at solutions. But after the war, in the decades after the war, disabled people came together in collectives, and disability movement developed in many countries, and the voice of disabled people became much stronger. And it's this strength of voice and also the increasing visibility of disabled people that's begun to change attitudes in society. And this change really is the light against the darkness of discrimination, of prejudice, of barriers, some of them unconscious barriers, against disabled people's full participation in society, the rights of that full participation.
Hi, my name is Tobias Zobart Górniak. Sono Romano, Chavo, Galiciaco. I'm a Romani gypsy and I come from Poland. I live in England with my family, and today is a really important day in our history for our Roma community. It's about not to forget, but to look to the future. So we always start with a blessing. Saure Manusha, Roma, Vecao Svetos, Dam Sasete Bachtale, Budbachte Sashchipen Saurenge Romenge, Saurenge Manushenge. Ten abis teraz amare historia. But si clara sa mare chavore, the jiven, sa wachimanusha, the karasveto. It was a blessing with peace and love and light, and not to forget our history, to teach our children to be the light in the future, and teach them to be great human beings. So from me and my family, just want to say peace and love. Thank you for being here today. We are one. Thank you. Peace.
I am Rwandan genocide survivor of 1994 against the Tutsi in Rwanda. In a genocide, I lost 95 people, cross family members, including my both parents, my mom, my dad. My wife also, she lost her family, who was buried alive. However, after genocide, I have a meet with all people who killed my family. My heart was full of anger, hatred, vengeance. However, as a born-again Christian, it was very hard for me to, because these people, they was my neighbors. It was very hard for me to live with them if I don't forgive them. I had a meeting with them. I told them, I forgive you for everything you have done to kill my family. That forgiveness was for me first, because the hatred and the anger, the vengeance, that was going to destroy my life if I don't forgive for them. After, they became my best friend. I was buying gift from UK. When I came to Rwanda, I give them the gift. The hatred was in my heart. My wife's heart was go out after forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for offender. Forgiveness, it was for ourselves. After we forgive them, our heart was healed. Thank you very much to hear my story.
I visited Auschwitz in February 2019 as part of the national project Lessons from Auschwitz. This allows 2 sixth form students to visit the site every single year. They aim to increase the knowledge and understanding of the Holocaust for young people and to highlight what can happen if prejudice and racism become acceptable. We first visited a town in Poland to see the impacts that the Holocaust had on communities. Then we visited Auschwitz-Birkenau, where each barrack had been converted into miniature museums to showcase how each prisoner was stripped of their basic human rights and branded into just a number. The barracks showed registration documents of inmates, piles of their hair, clothes and shoes, and other items seized from the prisoners as they entered the camp. Afterwards, we headed to Auschwitz. This had an atmosphere unlike any other, and there was no words to describe what it felt whilst being there. It was freezing whilst we visited the site, but the leader of our tour said to us, "Just think about how cold you are right now, and imagine what it must have been like to be in this weather, torn away from your family, with all your possessions stripped from you, in just blue striped pajamas, forced to work every single day." As a history student, it was very easy to get lost in the facts and figures, but one thing they emphasised on the first seminar was how personal it was to each and every single individual who was discriminated, hunted down and brutally killed during the Holocaust. However, my experience that I'll remember for the rest of my life taught me, as part of the younger generation, is to be grateful for the life I have and how privileged I am not to face discrimination and persecution, that we can live in a world not ruled by fear, and that we must look back and remember to build a brighter future.
Plymouth's my home. I grew up here, but I wasn't born here. After the Iranian Revolution in the late 70s and persecution of faith groups like members of the Baha'i faith, return to Iran became impossible for me and my family. When you're faced with big tests in life, it makes you wonder, how can I make a difference? How can I help make things better? As a member of Plymouth Centre for Faith and Cultural Diversity, We've been delighted to work with the City Council each year since this very special commemoration began in 2001. One of the biggest privileges was bringing to Plymouth each year the late Solly Irving, a Holocaust survivor from London, who from 2001 to 2016 spoke to over 30,000 Plymouth students, sharing his painful memory of those darkest times. Some of you may remember him. Solly passed away in 2017, and now the Centre has dedicated itself to preserving and promoting his story and legacy of hope. Solly always ended his talks with these words: "Try to create a better world than the one I had to endure." Let us all now be guided and inspired by these words, and let this be our light in the darkness.
Holocaust Memorial Day does not ask us simply to remember on a specific day each year. It is about what we do once we have learnt the lessons of the past, when we commemorate this day in whatever way that is. The challenge to each of us is to let those lessons inform our behaviour, our language, and the way in which we treat those who are different to us. Holocaust Memorial Day asks us to make a difference to the way in which we live our lives, now and in the future. We must be that light in the darkness. Thank you for joining our Holocaust Memorial Day commemorations. We will now have a moment of reflection in Hebrew.
El mole rachamim, shoichein bamoimim. Hamtzei menucho nechoino tachas kanfei hashchino. B'mahalois kadoshim utoirim, kazoi ha'oki hamasirim. Es nishmois acheinu v'achyoiseinu, asher nishpachtom kamayim, v'she'ovdu mipnei chamas hameitzik, ba'aratzois tachas memsheles Germanio. Ono bal horachamim, hastireim b'seisei k'nofecho lo'ilomim. Utzro b'tzro hachayim es nishmasom, Adonai hu nachalosom, v'yonuchu v'shalayim al mishkavom, v'noima, Amen.